Okay, well, welcome everybody. In this spell of cold weather we're having, it's nice that we're going to be.
Oh, I've muted you, Mervyn.
There we go. Right, welcome everybody. Sorry about that. And welcome to this evening. It's nice that in these colder days we're going to have a reminder of some of the warmer weather that we experienced in the past year or so. And a very warm welcome to David, who's going to talk to us this evening about hoverflies. So without any further ado, I will get the screen up for you, David, and then we'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much. And I should mention that I'm grateful to Mervyn because he's actually going to be the projectionist tonight. My laptop will do Zoom and it will do PowerPoint, but it doesn't seem to like to do it both at once.
With a bit of luck, everybody should be able to see that screen. Could someone wave at me to say yes, you can?
Yes, Mervyn. Yeah.
Right. You ready to start, Mervyn?
You there,
Can
Mervyn?
you hear me?
Mervyn?
Oh, I'm muted, I think.
We've lost Mervyn. Oh, there we go. Oh, back. And there we go. You're muted, Mervyn.
I know. Sorry, but I've just been. The reason you haven't been able to hear me is I was using the space bar to temporarily unmute, and that was mucking about with the PowerPoint. So I'll stop doing that, and we'll just go to the slideshow. And there we are, full screen from beginning. And it's over to you, David.
You're still muted, David. David, you're muted.
Okay, if I'm muted now, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Hoverflies is the subject for this evening, and I expect most people who are interested in wildlife know a few things about hoverflies. Obviously, a lot of you know a great deal more, but basically the things that most people know is they are a group of insects that look very like bees and wasps. They're mimics. They hover, and they are beneficial. They prey on aphids. Well, there's a bit more to it than that. Next slide, please, Mervyn. Mervyn?
Next slide, Mervyn.
I know. There we go.
Okay, thank you. Right. Well, all the adult hoverflies feed on nectar and pollen. In the United States and Canada, they're known as flower flies rather than hoverflies. And there are 3 subfamilies, one of them very small, which is the last one I've listed there. But it's the larvae of the subfamily, the Serfinae, that are predatory. They prey on aphids and other soft-bodied insects. So they are obviously beneficial to gardeners and farmers. The second subfamily, the Eristalinae, feed on plant material of all sorts, actually plant tissues, fungi, rotting wood, sap, all sorts of things like that. And then the larvae of the Microdontinae, a very small family, are predatory on ants. As the adults feed on nectar and pollen, all hoverflies are excellent pollinators. And the next slide, please. There are about 280 British species. I won't be able to show you anything like the full cast tonight, but I hope to show you a range of them. There'll be some that we'll miss out, unfortunately. In the presentation, I will label all the pictures with scientific names, the Latin names. This is because only a very small number have established common names, about 3. And although there have been many attempts to introduce common names, English language names for hoverflies, very few of them have caught on. 2 or 3 have, which we'll see as we go along. But in the future, I think we are going to be pressurized to use common names. Most people who study hoverflies are used to the Latin names. That's what they know them by. If you go to the Facebook group, that will be the Latin names that are used. That's what's used in things like iRecord. Okay, we'll start looking at some of the insects, please, Mervyn. Thank you. Perhaps the best known and most frequently seen hoverflies, this one, Epicerphus. You can see it's hovering in this picture. A lot of the literature talks about Hoverflies being very good hoverers, but in fact, females, this is a female, also hover. This is a female, and because the eyes are separated, in most species, the eyes are contiguous in the males and separated in the females. But as in all sorts of things like that, there are some exceptions, which we'll note as we go along. And this one does have a recently introduced name that seems to have caught on. It's unofficial, but it's known as the marmalade fly, and I expect it will stick. And the next one, please, Mervyn. Next slide, please, Mervyn.
Sorry, David, it's not moving forward. Just a moment. I don't know why that's there we go.
Oh yes, thank you. There we see our marmalade hoverfly. Again, it's being predated on by a crab spider, Misumena vatia. This was in my own garden, and this is a male. The reason that many hoverflies look like bees and wasps is in fact a defense. Doesn't bother the spider, but bees will avoid things that are brightly marked like bees and wasps, especially if they've had a nasty experience trying to eat a wasp or a bee, or they will avoid hoverflies because although they are perfectly harmless and probably will make a good meal for the birds. I have seen pictures of birds actually eating hoverflies, but it's unusual. It's a good defense for them. Next one, please, Mervyn. Can you go back?
Yep,
yes. This is a fairly typical hoverfly larva, and it's a species surface. In the case of the larvae, it's very difficult to get them right down to species level. The best way, of course, is if you can capture them and breed them out and you get the species. And the next one, please. Another larva, this one of Sciva parastri, which we'll see the adult in a few moments. And this was actually photographed in the Elmston Hardwick churchyard during one of the surveys there at a gig meeting. And the next, please. Okay, this is an adult surface. Surface is perhaps one of the best known hoverfly genera. It has 3 species. This is the scarcest of the 3. And it's distinguishable from the other 2. It probably doesn't show up very well in your screens because the eyes have hairs, very sparse white hairs, very short, like stubble almost. The other 2 species, the eyes are bare. And the next, please. The next few slides will be looking at members of the Surfinae, the predatory, the hoverflies that have predatory larvae. And you'll see that although they may fool a bird, most of them are not very good mimics of wasps and bees. They've got the bright yellow and black colouring, but I think most people, if they're familiar with bees and wasps, particularly if they're interested in wildlife, will show that they don't look well enough to be described as an excellent mimic. And the next one, another of this group. This one, quite a pretty one with sort of a backward facing chevrons. And the next one, please. That's one from a woodland species. Fairly scarce, but I have had it in my garden. And the next, please. This one, the bands aren't as ornate and the markings as the ones we've seen already. And this one is an excellent hoverer. And hovering behavior varies between different species, as we'll see as we go along. This particular species feeds from flowers, takes pollen while hovering, actually behaves rather like the hummingbird hawk moth when it does that. And the next, please. And here we see the one that we saw the green larva of before, Skiva parastri, very elegant. And this one, instead of having the yellow and black markings, it has white and black, so white hooks or what they call lunules on the abdomen. And next one, it's fairly close relative, Skiva selenitica. This you can see the eyes are together, it's a male, much less common, and the markings are not white, but they're yellow like the other hoverflies we've seen. And then yet another one, next slide please, from this group, Leucozona glaucia. Doesn't have yellow or white markings. This one has pale blue ones in the female. This is a female. They tend to be more grey, less bluish in the male. This is a hoverfly you find a lot on white umbellifers, Angelica in particular, in sort of dampish areas. And the next one, please. This is a fairly common one you'll see in the garden, in gardens particularly, and in grassland, Sphaerophoria scripta. And I talked about common names. There is a move to try and establish a system of common names for hoverflies. But I don't know if it's going to work out. The Americans and Canadians and Europeans have all agreed to common language, English language names. The one that the Americans use for this one is the Greenland globetail. So there are going to be some pretty strange names come up in some people's lists. This particular genus, the females look very different from the males, and we see in the next slide, we see a pair of Sphaerophoria, this one Philanthus. We've got the male at the bottom of the slide with its eyes contiguous, the female at the top with its eyes separated, but a completely different shape of the body. This particular species is less common, but you'll find it on heathland. We found it on most of the re-established heathlands in the Forest of Dean. Okay, and the next slide, please, Mervyn. I wanted to put in a few Platycarus. This is the one I picked out. The males of the genus Platycarus are quite difficult to separate, though this one is distinctive. And the name Platycarus refers to their tarsi, flattened, and they do have curiously modified front legs. This is a female, very colourful when it's in flight, though its wings are dark, so when it rests, it's very difficult to see the colouring of the abdomen. And this one in the American scheme is, they're calling it the horn-hand sedge sitter. Okay, and the next one, please. Right, we're going to look at a couple of genera in more detail, Xanthogramma and Chrysotoxum. And these are genera where the eggs are laid in ants' nests. And the belief is that the larvae of these hoverflies feed on the ant-tended aphids that ants look after. This one, Xanthogramma pedicequum, very colourful. This was in my garden last year. And the next slide shows the same actual individual hovering, which it does fairly regularly. Notice the colours, again, it's a yellow and black, bright lemon yellow in this case, and black. Another species, next slide, much less common, Citrofasciatum. The legs are much more orange than bright yellow, and also the scutellum, which is the little bit at the back of the thorax, the sort of semicircular bit, instead of being bright yellow, is orange as well. This is much scarcer, particularly because it has a very short season. It's usually found on cow parsley, and almost all the records we have are in May, and this is not just Gloucestershire, but countrywide. And the next one, please. And here's the other genus. Not sure we haven't skipped a slide. Strange. Okay. Do you have the numbers of the slides by you, Mervyn?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Let me just have a look.
That's the one. Yes. Chrysotoxum. These are also ones interested in ants. And you notice that these ones have very long antennae, which most hoverflies don't, which makes them even more Hymenoptera-like. And the next one, which is the one that, oh, yeah, and there's another one in between that that's the one, yes, yes. Very colourful one. Of the chrysotoxums, this one is a great hoverer, hovers in sort of free space, the males do, obviously sort of holding territory or something like that. And then the next one. That's it, yes. This one and the next two are brilliant, very effective mimics of social wasps, you know, the usual common wasp and German wasp. When you see it at rest, you can tell that it's a hoverfly, although it has the long antennae like a wasp. It only has one pair of wings, as it's a true fly. But when it's on the move, it looks exactly like a wasp moving around. So I have to keep an eye on what look like wasps in case they turn out to be these hoverflies. And the next one, the next two look very similar. That's a smaller one that comes later in the year. And the next one, this little trio, that's it, Chrysotoxum arcuatum. Now those three, which you can see are very alike, the ways to tell them apart are actually by the ratios between the different antennal segments. But the interesting of this thing about this particular species and the first of the three we saw, is in the UK, the distribution is almost exclusive. The first species, Chrysotoxum cautum, is almost only found west of a line between the Humber and the Severn, and the Chrysotoxum east of that line. And this one we're looking at now, west of that line. But there is a little overlap in the Forest of Dean, where we do find this this particular one. Okay. Now we move on to another very good mimic. And this is one of the few that have an established common name, the drone fly, because it resembles the drone of the honeybee. I've been out on a walk with a bee keeper who we've found a lot of these Aristalis tenax on hedge, and she was quite convinced it was a swarm of bees. And I think I sort of convinced her otherwise by picking one up by the wing in my fingers, which I wouldn't dare do with a honeybee. Now, this is the first of a series of ones related to the Eristalis. We'll see some similar ones. And the larvae of all of this group are what are known as rat-tailed maggots. They have a long breathing tube which looks like a tail, and they're aquatic. But we'll see an example as we move on. So the next one, please. Very closely related to the drone flies, this one, Eristalis pertinax. A narrower body, the males, that's a female. The males have a much more tapered body, almost shaped like I was going to say a carrot, perhaps that's not a good thing, but a good analogy. This one is very common, and I guarantee if you have a garden, once you get a bit of fine weather from February onwards, you'll find it hovering. And the next. Another Eristalis, and this one has a particular way it uses hovering. The male will do this courtship display, hovering over a female, and after a while, sometimes mating will take place. It seems to be unique to that particular species, though there are other species closely related that have a different but somewhat similar way. The drone fly, the male doesn't do it over the top of the female, it does it sort of alongside, the same sort of altitude, if you like. Now, the next one, we see the same species, Eristalis nemorum, and it actually appears to be doing its courtship hover over a honeybee. Obviously, it's not going to mate with the honeybee. Now, whether it's been fooled by mimicry, I don't know. It's unlikely. Probably it's being aggressive. It's sort of saying, get off my plant, so get off my flower. But I have seen these ones hovering over other species of hoverfly and even over bumblebees. And the next, please. Now, this species of Eristalis, if you look at it, it looks very like a sort of hairy version of the drone fly, Eristalis intricaria. That's a male. Now the next slide shows a female, which, as you can see, looks very like a bumblebee, quite different in its coloration of its abdomen, but that's the typical female. And the next one shows an unusual version. I haven't seen it anywhere else, nor have I seen photographs of it, but it's a female of the intricaria, but with buff tail hairs rather than white. So it's mimicking the buff-tailed bumblebee, Bombus terrestris. So quite an unusual one. I think I've only seen it once. I think this was at Mallard's Pike. Okay, and the next, please. Now, related to the Eristalis are the Eristalinus. And you can see the eyes. A characteristic of this genus is that the eyes are sort of speckled. Those are sort of a palish, sort of beige color with black spots. This is an interesting one. It's normally a coastal species, but old records show that it was quite common in Gloucestershire back in the 19th century, but we've never found it in recent times, and we don't know where in Gloucestershire those 19th century records were. It was just given us in Gloucestershire. And the next one, this is the other species of Eristalinus. Again, you see the speckled eyes. The abdomen is not sort of totally black. This is found in wetlands, reasonably common in Gloucestershire, a bit smaller than the previous one. Okay, and the next one. This is one I think that's quite likely to have a name given to it that will really catch on. It's an unofficial name, Myothropa florea, but if you look at the thorax, the back of the thorax, that's to the right of the picture, you can see what looks like the Batman logo. Can you see that? And so the name that's unofficially been given to it is the Batman hoverfly. which I suspect will catch on. It's interesting that the character Batman comics was introduced to the world in 1939. Its logo has been on that fly probably for about 250 million years. And the next, please. And here is one of the I had a request. Can you go back, Mervyn, one? Right. If I point it out, can you see my cursor?
Not yet. Oh, sorry. I've got the cursor, David. Here we are.
Yeah. That's the Batman bit.
Yeah.
Okay, and back to forward to the next one, please. And here's one of these rat-tailed maggots. This is actually the pupa of one of them. And Robert Homan photographed this. And he bred it out, and it turned out to be the one we've just seen, Myothropa florea, the Batman hoverfly. Okay, and the next, please. Other ones in another genus closely related to the Aristalis is Helophilus, and there are a few more as well. Helophilus pendulus, common in gardens. And this is one of the exceptions to the rule about the eyes being separated in only the female. In Helophilus, it's both the male and the female have the eyes separated. This is a fairly common one. The next slide is a much less common one, much more impressive. It's considerably larger, brighter yellow, or lemon yellow, I'd say almost grapefruit yellow. I tend to think of this one and the one, Stalis pendulus, as like comparing a missel thrush, this one being the missel thrush, to a song thrush. The missel thrush is larger, more sort of striking. This is a really sort of charismatic hoverfly associated with wetlands. Okay, next one, please. Now, here is another one with a long established common name, Narcissus fly. I suspect it was given this name not by entomologists, but by horticulturalists, because it's one of the few hoverflies that's regarded as a garden pest. Its larvae eat the bulbs, eat holes in bulbs of daffodils. It's perhaps not a real pest for gardeners, but it's a pest for daffodil growers, people who grow them commercially, because usually it doesn't destroy the daffodils. I get plenty of these in my garden, but my daffodils grow well. But if I dug them up and tried to sell the bulbs, no one would buy them because they'd have nasty holes eaten out. But an interesting thing about this one, the Narcissus fly, is it's a bumblebee mimic, and this one species mimics several species of bumblebees. There is sort of about 7 or 8 different color forms. If we see the next slide, we'll see another one. Yeah, there's a different color form of the Narcissus fly. Mervyn, is everyone seeing the captions?
I think so. Yes, I certainly am.
Okay, well, that's good. Yes, as long as it's there.
Yeah.
I can't see it in this one. Yes, good. And then the next one, yet another color form of the Narcissus fly, mimicking a sort of like a red-tailed bumblebee. And now we move to the other that one regards as a pest, quite different, Eumerus tuberculatus, known as the lesser bulb fly. This is a pest also of Narcissus bulb, a tiny one. This is about sort of a 3 or 4 millimeters in length. I should be saying a bit more about size, I suppose. I think it's believed that the difference in what this one does, the larvae of this one feed on decaying daffodil bulbs rather than ones that are in otherwise good condition. And I think we've got to a stage here when we could take a short break.
Right.
Happy to have
Okay.
a break.
Yep. So
It's now-
it's 2 minutes past 8. So shall we say 12 minutes past? We'll resume.
12 minutes, I think we can say. 15 minutes, quarter past 8.
All right, quarter past will be fine. Yep. Give me
Okay.
time to make a cup of tea. Excellent.
Right.
Okay. See you back then.
Okay, I just go away and come back and we resume.
Yep. Yep. Leave
Thank you
everything
very much.
switched on.
Yep.
Your voice seems to be holding out okay, David.
It's fine. Is it coming across okay?
Yes, very clearly, thank you.
Good, good.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I don't
Did you
suppose there
go-
are any. Go on, sorry.
I was going to say, did you go bird ringing yesterday?
No, I didn't. I decided it was too cold to do it by myself.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's good to share the pain.
Yes.
Yeah. I suspect I will do some in the garden tomorrow morning.
All right. Yes.
I've got a lot of birds coming to the garden at the moment, and my car's in the garage, so
Mhm.
I'm forced to stay at home. Yeah.
Right. Getting interesting ones.
Yeah, I've got quite a few black caps.
Well, I've done well for black caps this winter. They started quite early. Yes, I haven't seen any in the last few days, but yes, yes, I'm doing well.
I always say to people, if you want black caps in your garden, to put apples out on the bushes. I cut them in half and core them, and then stick the apples over bare twigs on bushes.
Oh, right. Yes,
and
yes,
black caps absolutely love that.
yes. They like mistletoe, of course.
Yes.
You suggested that last time, Mervyn.
Yeah.
And I put loads out round our back garden, and they work really effectively, but as bird scarers.
Well, you should also find in this really cold weather, David, redwings come to them.
I've had redwings recently in the garden. Not a flock of them, but I got to they're eating berries off my pyracantha, which is nice.
Yeah.
Well, we had redwings earlier when they polished off all the holly berries. Then they moved on, I think.
Yes, yeah.
But what we have got, which I'm pleased about, we've got up to 8 greenfinches back. So it's nice to see some of those coming back.
That's good news. Yes, I haven't had many in recent years.
No, it's a bit of a red letter day if I see a greenfinch in the garden.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
But the bullfinches disappeared last winter, and we haven't seen one of those this winter either. So
No,
I don't know where they are.
Yes.
Whether they all succumb to the same thing as the greenfinches, I don't know. But they seem to have disappeared.
Up to a couple of years ago, I did very well for bullfinches and redpolls as well, but not for the last couple of winters.
Yeah, it's interesting you're saying about the blackcaps enjoying mistletoe, because the orchards I'm working in at the moment, mistletoe is not tolerated. So but I've caught quite a few blackcaps in there this winter. But the farm I used to work at, he would allow mistletoe to grow on a few trees at intervals throughout the orchard. So I always put the nets near those for that very reason, because that's when I would get the winter blackcaps.
Yes.
When they're next to the mistletoe. Yeah.
Well, I was advised by a tree surgeon who was pruning my apple tree a few years ago, get rid of all that mistletoe, but I refused to because of the birds it attracted. But he was right. It killed the tree eventually.
Right. And did it sort of kill it through the semi-parasitism, or did it cause a wind blow or throw?
I don't know what the cause was. It just gave up.
Right.
Gave up. Having had a couple of very poor years, and it just sort of gave up. And the same tree surgeon has actually turned it into a sort of a deadwood sculpture, which I can hang bird feeders off, which is nice. I used to hang my bird feeders off that tree.
A tree surgeon that I employed referred to them as conservation stumps.
Oh, right. Yes.
Yeah, we've been having a discussion at the Hobbs Nature Reserve about ivy on trees, and the danger to the trees. I mean, I tend to be of the opinion that it's only trees that are weakened through disease that tend to be at risk from it. I don't know if anybody else has any views on this.
I think I've heard that said as well. Yes, I get rid of quite a lot of ivy on the ground in my garden, but I'm very pleased to find ivy in other places, particularly for the insects.
Didn't we have Paul Rutter in a previous talk say that it was only when it got up into the crown of a tree and caused increased wind blow that it was really a problem, that further
Right.
down it doesn't matter nearly as much.
Okay.
I've lost an apple tree and a holly tree killed by ivy.
Why was it killed by the ivy though? What did the ivy do to kill it? Did it smother it and prevent it photosynthesizing?
It smothered the holly tree,
Okay. Okay.
and the apple tree just seemed to tangle round the bark, the trunk, and perhaps the trunk couldn't expand.
Right. Okay. Strangler figs certainly do that. But,
When I was young, my grandfather still had an 8-acre vicarage garden or rectory garden in Bushy, and it had lines of elm trees all the way down the side, all gone now, of course. And I remember one time the bottom, they were massive trees, and one of the bottom limbs came off one of these trees one winter, leaving a scar about 6 feet long on the tree. And all the way down through nearly the whole of the scar, you could see ivy roots that had actually eaten and gone right through the joint of the tree. And then no helped the limb come off. And we were talking about a limb that was about 3 feet diameter, the limb itself, that snapped 2 silver birches clean in half as it came down as well. I mean, they were big trees. But I'm really surprised that I still remember that, seeing all this ivy root actually in the what must have been the growing wood of the tree.
gosh, I didn't think they penetrated the trees.
Well, whether there was a slight crack there to start with that they got into, I don't know.
Yeah, and then perhaps like ice thickening it by growth.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's 15:15. So are you ready to go again, David?
I'm ready to resume, Mervyn. Thank you very
Right,
much. From
I will
the next
start.
slide.
Let's see. This is the first time I've stopped sharing a PowerPoint in mid-flow, so it'll be interesting to see if I get back now.
Oh yeah, I hope so. Yes.
Here we go.
I'm sure you will.
That's where we left off, isn't it? Oh no, no, it's
no.
not. We've gone back a long way. Okay.
It's down to slide
43, you said, I think, didn't
40,
you?
43 we finish. Yes, so
Right, there it is.
yeah, yes, next one, that's the one that your cursor is on. That's our next
Okay.
one.
So, that one.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. There we go.
Right. Right, resuming the talk about hoverflies. This one here, Creorina ranunculi, is one of my favorites because it's one you don't see very often. As you can see, it's a bumblebee mimic. Its eyes are apart, it's a female, and it mimics the red-tailed bumblebee in this case. But there is another form as well. Next one, please, Mervyn. That's a male of the white-tailed form of this one. A woodland specialist, and it has the odd characteristic. Its flight period is very early in the season, so March, April, it's almost finished by June. So if you want to see it, you have to be in ancient woodland or thereabouts in the early part of the season on a beautiful day. So it doesn't fly if it's not fine. But one of the largest of our hoverflies, I would say typically about sort of 14, 15 millimeters in length. And the next one, from the same genus, we get another bumblebee mimic. This one mimicking the carder bee. This is Creorana berberina. Again, I'm not seeing the caption, but I guess you all are.
Oh, right. I'm seeing it.
Oh, that, as long as everyone's seeing it.
Well,
that's
I don't
fine.
know. How about,
I'm seeing it as well, Mervyn.
okay. Right.
That's fine as long as you see it. And this also has another color form. Next one, please. Yep. This is the other typical color form of Creorina berberina. But the interesting one is this, it mimics a bumblebee. Some of you will probably be familiar with the tree bumblebee, Bombus hypnorum. And this is a very good mimic, sort of brown-haired thorax, the black abdomen, the white tail. The strange thing is that this hoverfly has been around in Britain since almost records began. People started reporting, describing them, so back in the early 19th century. But the tree bumblebee has only been in the UK since about 2001. So interesting thing that the mimic was here long before its model. And the next one, please. Now we're going to look at 3 species from the genus Sericomia. Sericomia silentis. This one is a very good wasp mimic. Again, a large hoverfly, 13, 14 millimeters in length. This is common in the Forest of Dean, quite colorful, quite spectacular. But there are very few records outside the Forest of Dean within the county. I have seen it in my garden, on ivy incidentally, but just a handful of records away from the Forest of Dean. And the next one, please, it's relative, a bit smaller, rather exotic looking with the reddish scutellum and sort of cream colored bands on the bars on the abdomen. This is a Sericomia lopona, much scarcer. You find it in sort of boggy places. We only have a few records in in Gloucestershire, but all from the Forest of Dean. And the next one, please, Mervyn. This is one that's changed its genus. It was in the genus Arctophila, and in recent years has been moved into Sericomia. So it's a hairy version of Sericomia. Mimics those sort of golden type bumblebees like the carder bee. But it's interesting, the name Arctophila, the old generic name, because I expect some of you know that an arctophile is the name given to people who study or collect teddy bears, a lover of teddy bears, lover of bears. But and it's appropriate, I think, or it was appropriate for this hoverfly, because of all hoverflies, I think this one is the most teddy bear-like in appearance with its golden fur. But it was called Arctophila back certainly in the early 19th century, long before before teddy bears were introduced. This one you'll tend to find in the west of the country. Okay, well, yes, we've.
Sorry, David, I moved on too quickly.
We can, yeah, I was just about to say move on. This one mostly seen in the west of the county, though I have seen it here in Woodmancote in the Cotswolds. Okay, next one. Now we see perhaps the best known of all the bumblebee mimics. It's a very good, convincing bumblebee mimic. Most naturalists would know it's not a bumblebee because it's got large eyes and short antennae, rather than the small eyes and long antennae, and it has 2 wings rather than 4. But this one, Volucella bombilans, has 2 main color forms. This one, which mimics white-tailed bumblebees, and the next one, please. This form mimics the red-tailed bumblebee. But the interesting thing about the Volucella bumblebees, not only do they look like bumblebees, but they actually are associated with bumblebees. The females lay their eggs in bumblebees' nests, where the larvae exist and grow up, as they say, as scavengers in the nest. You're eating debris and detritus. And the next one, please. Now this again, like our buff-tailed form of the Eristalis intricaria, I also found a buff-tailed form of this Volucella bombilans. Again, I've never seen in pictures or anything, so it obviously was a rarity. I found this was at Blaisdon Wood. This is a female, and it obviously mimics the buff-tailed bumblebees. And the next one, please. Yet another rare form. I've seen this twice. The first one I saw was at Dowdswell Reservoir many years ago, and I couldn't find anywhere in the literature that this form exists, like the red-tailed form, but with a white tail. I've seen it once since, and I've seen the odd reference in the literature, and there are some other rare forms. But that's the Volucella bombilans that both mimics and exploits bumblebees. So the next one, please, Mervyn. We're sticking with the genus Volucella. Now here we have a relative that looks like a wasp in its colouring. And just as the bombilans exploit bumblebees, this one exploits wasps' nests. The female, and this is a female, lays her eggs in wasps' nests. And it's been shown that actually the larvae of Volucella inanis do actually predate the wasp larvae rather than merely living on as a scavenger. And this, most of these last few hoverflies we've seen, the Cryorinas and the Volucellas, are among the largest we have, and they're about typically 13, 14 millimeters long. But this next one, Mervyn, please, is Volucella zonaria, which is easily the largest British hoverfly. It's about a third larger in size than any of the hoverflies we've already seen. Volucella zonaria does have a common name that's called a recently introduced one. It's not official, but fits very well, the hornet hoverfly. And as with Volucella inanis, it exploits social wasps' nests, including those of hornets. Again, no proof in this case that it larvae prey on the larvae of the hornets, but perhaps it will be proven eventually. Now you notice the thorax of the male, this is a male, is black. But if we move to the next slide, the females of the hornet hoverfly, Volucella zonaria, are this chestnut color. Makes it even more hornet-like. And we've got another picture, next slide, of a female of the same species. Very impressive. As I say, a third larger than any other British hoverfly. But for any people tuning in from the south of France to this, they will be very contemptuous, both of what I'm saying about its size and referring to as the hornet hoverfly. Because there is a species in Europe, particularly in south of France. That's our nearest place where we've seen it, where it's been seen to Britain. Mylesia crabroniformis, which is about a third as large again and as a hornet mimic. Hence its name crabroniformis, meaning like a hornet. So that's we've seen the Volucellas that mimic and exploit bumblebees and social wasps. Now the next one, please, Mervyn. Another Volucella, again large, not as big as the hornet one, but it's sort of 14, 15 millimeter in length. Volucella pellucens, which is a really grand hoverer. Now this one doesn't look anything like a wasp, but it does the same as the Volucella inanis and zonaria. It lays its eggs in wasps' nests, and the larvae grow up in exploiting the larvae or the contents of a wasp's nest. Now, does it mimic anything? It does have a look-alike, which is actually another hoverfly. Next slide. Oh, notice that one had quite dark black clouds on the wings. Here is the hoverfly Leucozona lucorum, which has the same sort of pattern on the abdomen and the same dark bands on the wings, dark clouds on the wings. But this belongs to the Surfinae, the predatory hoverflies. So one wonders, I suppose, do they both mimic some long extinct wasp? Who knows? Anyway, next slide, we're back to Volucella. And here is one that looks very like Volucella pollucens, but instead of the white squares on the abdomen, they are golden. Now, this is an exception to the other ones. We see a mating pair here. You can see distinctly the male with the eyes together and the female with the eyes separated. It's not interested at all in Hymenoptera. It's lives on the dead wood in ancient woodlands. It's what's called saproxylic hoverfly. Okay, thank you, Mervyn. Next one. Now here we're going to see one which is quite a good bee mimic. And we're looking at a rarity here, at least nationally scarce, possibly even sort of endangered. Now the story of this particular individual we see here is we were at a gig meeting, Gloucestershire Invertebrate Group meeting at Weston Park, near Weston Sub-Edge, and somebody spotted a hoverfly, which was this one perched. Keith Alexander and I both sort of rushed to it, and I took a couple of photographs. Neither of us knew what it was, and we started speculating. I said I thought it was Cryorhina silica. Keith said he thought it was one called Brachypalpus lafriformis. And I said as a joke, perhaps it's Calcosurfus unotus, which I didn't really believe. It was just a tongue-in-cheek joke, because that was a real rarity, never been seen in Gloucestershire, hardly anywhere in this part of the country. But when I analysed my photographs when I got home and compared them to specimens of the Natural History Museum, I discovered it was indeed Calcosurfus unotus. But it was the first time a female had ever been seen in Britain. The book said only males have ever been found. That's not the case now, where other females have been found. But it was quite a coup on that day. We've only found, I think, one other specimen of the species in Gloucestershire so far. That was a male. And the next one, please, Mo. Right, we're going to look at it. The next 5 or 6 slides are going to be about the genus Calosia. It's a genus, by far the largest genus in terms of the number of species that we have in this country, and over 30 different species. Almost all are practically entirely black, their bodies, except for the first 2 I'll show you. This one here, Calosia illustrata, as you can see, is quite a good bumblebee mimic. And the next one, please. This is not my photograph, it's taken by Richard Spivey. And this one, Chilosia chrysocoma, is a very good mimic of the Andrena fulva. Do you know the tawny mining bee? It's around the same time of year, and that very much sort of foxy red color. A great rarity, this one. Richard saw this at Sherborne, at the Northfield Barn car park. I was able to identify it. I've never seen one in my life. There are only small number, only 4 previous county records, all of these before 1940, and most of them sort of probably in the 19th century. Right, next one. Now we go on to the all black Calosia. Now, looking at nearly 30 different plain black hoverflies and identifying them, you'd think is quite a challenge. It's not as bad as one thinks. There are good keys, and there are various characteristics and habits, jizzes that distinguish them. And we'll look at a few. Here is Calosia variabilis, and this one has black legs and hairy eyes, and it's the only one with those characteristics that tends to perch on a leaf with its wings at this sort of 45 degrees or so position. Most Calosia have the wings folded back over the abdomen. And the next one, another one that's easy to recognize, again, hairy eyes and all black legs, but it has these little sort of orange patches at the tips of the wing, the base of the wings. And you find this one on white umbellifers, particularly hogweed. It's much smaller, quite a squat looking thing. And the next one, please. Another Calosia. This is one of 2 or 3 that its larvae feed on fungi, Boletus in particular. Now here you can see that although the body is black, the legs are partly yellow, and the eyes, in fact, are bare, not hairy. And the scutellum, you know where the scutellum is, Mervyn? Point that out. The tip of it is yellow. That happens in the female of this species and 2 related species. So another indication, another thing that helps to identify which species you have. And the next one, please. Another Calosia. Although they're mainly black, they're quite handsome things. This one is Calosia vulpina, a female. And you find this particularly on wild carrot flowers. And you can see the abdomen has sort of bands of white hairs. The male, strangely enough, looks fairly different in that the hairs on the body are yellow, not white. And the next one, please. Now, I have to go back on some of the things I said before. I said that these are easy to identify, Calosia, and I also said that the narcissus fly and the lesser bulb fly were the only hoverflies in the UK that are considered garden pests. But all that may be changing slightly. I saw this hoverfly, we actually saw 2 of them, at the churchyard survey in Bishop's Cleeve. I caught it in a tube, thinking I could take it home and identifying it using the published keys for UK hoverflies. I was frustrated. I tried all sorts of things and kept coming to dead ends. It would come out as nothing British at all. So I looked in a Dutch book, actually print in English language, Van Veen's book on European hoverflies. And I quickly found it. And if you notice, this one, unlike all the other black-bodied Calosia, has actually dark wing clouds. And it turned out to be this one, Calosia cerulescens. And it had only been introduced to the British list in 2006. It's an invader from the continent, probably coming across in plant material. So that's why I couldn't find it in the keys that I was using, the English language keys. But it turns out that this hoverfly, its larvae are leaf miners of sempervivum, the house leek, which are plants often grown in cemeteries. So John Widgery and I went looking for house leeks in the cemetery there, and eventually he found them first. He found the plants, and I looked, and there were the leaf mines of this one, Calosia cerulescens. So this one, which is gradually expanding north and westwards from the southeast where it first appeared, I suppose could be considered a potential garden pest. Okay, Mervyn, and the next one, please. This one related to the calosia. In fact, it was considered a calosia in Victorian times. Portavinia maculata. And of all the hoverflies, this one is the most specialist of all in its plants you find it on. It breeds and feeds on ramsons, Allium ursinum, you know, the wild garlic. And I guarantee that almost anywhere you find wild garlic in flower in this county, in the county, you will find this hoverfly around if the weather is sunny. So that's the Portavinia, very specialist. Okay, and the next one, please, Madam. We're moving on to a few other hoverflies that are not particularly related to one another. Ringia. There are two species. Ringia campestris is the common one, but the one here I show is Ringia rostrata, which used to be regarded as a great rarity. And then sort of round the turn of this century, it began to appear in large numbers. I first found it on in Gotherington Wood, got very excited about it, but it started turning up all over the place there. It's a woodland one. But it's had a rather diminished in recent years, as most hoverflies have done. And the next one, please. Brachypalpoides lentus, which has this red abdomen, ancient woodland species. And the next, please. And I've put in two examples of this species, one of the smaller ones, sort of about 5 millimeters in length, Ripponensia splendens, Ripponensia splendens. This nice sort of coppery color, abdomen and thorax. Actually, the abdomen is blue, the thorax is this coppery, purpley color, and the eyes are sort of ochre color. That's a male, as you can see by the eyes. And the next picture, Mervyn, please, shows the female. And then related to it, next one, we have Leergaster metallina, which is a bright green metallic hoverfly. This is one of those ones that are where the eyes are separated from both genders, both sexes. This one is actually a female. And the next one, please. Brachiopa, very small hoverflies, and people used to get very excited about them because they were quite hard to find. It took me a good few years before I saw them. There are 4 species in the UK, quite difficult to tell apart. This one is the one of only 2 that I've actually seen. The other one is very specialist in its habitat. This one is the one one's most likely to see. You can't really see it very well without a pointer. The front right of its thorax is sort of what are called the humeri. Humeri and posterior calari. The back are orange, like the color of the abdomen. That doesn't apply in the other 4 species. But everyone gets quite excited when you see Brachiopa. They feed on sap of trees, and you find them at sap runs. And the next, please, Mervyn. Sphygina clunipes. Sphygina are these very narrow hoverflies. There are similar ones called Bacca in the predatory hoverflies. I haven't shown one tonight. Sphygina, a woodland species, quite difficult to tell the 4 species apart. I was quite pleased that I was able to photograph this one and identify it. Okay, and the next one is one of my favorites, and it's nicely perched on Devil's Spit scabious, Ferdinandia cuprea, a reasonably common woodland species. And next one, please. I'm going to show, this picture is not mine. It was done by John Phillips, Calissa aurata, a bit like in color the previous one we've seen, Ferdinandia. It has these white hairs at the back of the scutellum, these long antennae with white tips, very unusual, very rare. Never seen it myself, unfortunately. There are 2 or 3 species in the genus, but I've not seen them, any of them. Yes, thank you. This one is one of the UK's rarities, not seen in Gloucestershire at all. Caliprobula speciosa, only found in the UK in the New Forest and in Windsor Forest. And even in the New Forest, you have to look very carefully for it. It's only in certain woods. This one was taken in Denny Wood, and you find it close to the bases of trunks of beech trees. I've been going to the New Forest for years. My wife came from there. We had lots of holidays there. But I only found this with help from a local who knew where to find it. He managed to vector me towards it, so I was delighted I was able to find it. That's that. And the next one, please. Another one from John Phillips, Eriazona cerfoides. This is the white-tailed form. There's also a red-tailed form. This, as you can see, is a bumblebee mimic, but it's the only bumblebee mimic species that's from the Cerfinae, the aphid predatory larvae group, subfamily. I have seen it myself, but not in Gloucestershire. In Gloucestershire, there are 10 records, county records, 9 of which were from John Phillips himself, and all in the Forest of Dean area. And the next one, also attributable to John Phillips, Myolepta potens, which is a nationally vulnerable, critically endangered species. It appeared to have disappeared from Britain after about 1940. Then it's been found since then at one site in Herefordshire until John Phillips started finding it in 2009 in the Forest of Dean, since when he's found it 6 times. So it's just known currently from just 2 sites in the UK, 2 sites but not contiguous in the UK. John has had a great record for finding rarities among hoverflies. Okay, next one, please. And I did mention there was a 3rd subfamily, very small subfamily, only 4 species, Microdon, none in Gloucestershire. This was from the New Forest. And I've seen another species there in New Forest, this one, Microdon myrmicae. They're associated with ants' nests. Their larvae develop in ants' nests. For many years, their larvae were not known to be Diptera. They were thought of as some previously unknown mollusk. For years, they were thought of as a mollusk, till I suppose somebody was able to breed it out, and out came this hoverfly. Okay, just a few more slides. This one, the last half dozen, I'm going to show you some hoverflies from elsewhere in the world, outside the UK, 4 from Asia and 4 from North America. This one was photographed in Hong Kong. It's probably the commonest of the Hong Kong species. And the next one, please. Asarchina species. Not able to tell in sight which species it is. I mean, there are 2 possibilities, but very yellow abdomen with only minimal black on it. This next one, which is a favorite of mine, I've never been able to, although I saw it quite a few times on visits to Hong Kong, I've never photographed it to my satisfaction. You can see it looks like a fairly standard aphid predatory type hoverfly. except it has these wonderful deep blue wing clouds, rather like, I suppose, the dragonfly, the banded demoiselle, Caloptris splendens. Now, this is one of the, I think, advantages of photographing, because if you see these in a collection and museum, those wing clouds will have faded to brown. The blue, which is sort of iridescence, I think, is only visible in life. And the next one, please. Another one from Hong Kong. And you notice the eyes. It's our old friend Eristolinus that we saw a couple of rather sort of murky, not very bright coloured species, British species. Here's a nation relative of it. And then the next one, please. Moving to North America, a very small hoverfly, Toxomerus marginatus. And I've seen other species of Toxomerus, probably one of the smallest hoverflies there. And then the final picture, there's one more slide after the picture. This I photographed in the National Arboretum in Washington, not knowing it was a hoverfly at the time. I photographed it. I took two slides. I'd wished it had been many years later when I would have had a camera that I could take a video, because while it's perched as it is there, what you can't see is it's actually moving its wings, it's waving its wings, but a number of flies wing wave in other families, but this one was waving its wings asymmetrically. So as the right wing was going forwards, the left one was going back, and vice versa. And I haven't really seen a report of this in any literature that this actually happens, but I have heard Americans say, oh yes, it does that. It would be lovely to have quite a rarity. There are Spilomania in Europe as well. That's the only one I've ever seen. And a really flamboyant wasp mimic. It's a large hoverfly. You can see it's not content with having wasp-like markings on its abdomen. It has this chevron on the thorax, and even the eyes are striped black and yellow. That's the final hoverfly to show you. One more slide, please, Mervyn, which I don't think is a very helpful one. Recommended books. I should have done a better job of this, and especially as these were going to come out of date soon. British Hoverflies, which was the first standard work for many, many years, in 2002. Alan Stubbs emailed me the other day to say that he's doing a revision of that. Whether to do a full revision or not, I don't know. And then the field guide and the wild guides by Stuart Ball and Roger Morris. There have been 2 editions, but they are preparing a 3rd one. It's fun being a hoverfly recorder, but if you're a hoverfly recorder, you keep having to re-buy the same book again when they issue new versions of it. One other thing I'll mention, not a book, but Stephen Falk, who illustrated with paintings British hoverflies, also has a website on Flickr. If you Google Stephen Falk, it's Stephen with a V, Stephen Falk hoverflies, you will get pictures and descriptions of all the British hoverflies. Stephen is quite keen on producing common names, and he has common names for all of them. But I haven't seen anyone using any very much except marmalade fly and Batman hoverfly and hornet hoverfly of the newly produced ones. There is also a Facebook hoverfly group, which I look at regularly. With all these online platforms, the poor GNS recorder doesn't often get as many records as he or she would like through normal channels by direct contact. But contacts are welcome. It's nice to talk to people and have contact with people. Well, thank you very much. And thank you to Mervyn for doing the slide, moving the slides. Many thanks.
I think I finally got used to it by the end, David. I was
Right,
moving on at the right time. No, thank you ever so much for that. And first of all, can I say what lovely photographs they were? I find them incredibly difficult to photograph. So to have so many really nice photographs like that is absolutely brilliant.
That's very
And-
kind. There's a lot of trial and error. Yes, no, I tended not to use the errors in presentations.
Well, of course, no. As I say, I discard hundreds of photographs each day. The other thing that I found particularly useful was you pointing out some of the main identification features. I mean, I'd prepared a couple of questions in advance, and you've actually answered them during the talk. The sort of things to look out for, like hairs on the eyes, or the patterning on the abdomen and the scutellum, and things like that. But there is one question I wonder, and it's possibly not answerable easily, and that is, and I think you indicated how difficult it was when you talked about the beekeeper that you were walking with, but is there an easy way of just looking at an insect and saying, oh yes, that's a hoverfly?
Not really an easy way. It's getting to know the different species. You can tell hoverflies by the wing venation. They have something called the spurious vein, and there's a false margin, vena spuria false margin. But it's not a thing you see very easily in the field. If you need to look fairly closely.
Yeah.
But
No. Go on. Sorry, David.
Generally, I think it's getting to know. I'm looking at the books. The books are extremely well illustrated now, and as I say, Steve Fawkes' Hoverflies on Flickr site is well worth, because he doesn't just show one picture of a male and a female. He shows umpteen of each from different angles, and as I say, he's got the lot, all the British species there.
I think he's pretty keen on bees as well, isn't he?
Yeah, amazing. Yes,
Yeah.
keen on bees too. Yes,
Yeah.
of course, he's written a book on bees.
Yes. Yeah.
Amazing.
Now, what we
He
usually
started
do,
off as an illustrator using painting, doing the pictures.
Oh, okay.
But he was approached for pictures in other books, but now he's sort of switched totally to photography, which he does very well.
Yeah. Now, I don't know whether you're aware of a facility on here, David. People have posted a couple of questions while you've been talking. So what we tend to do now is work our way through what's called the chat. But I can see that Alan has got a question there. So Alan, do you want to ask your question?
Do I have to click on anything?
No, Alan will do it and he'll talk to you.
Just unmuted myself. You mentioned with quite a few of the species that there were different forms, sort of like one imitating a buff-tailed bumblebee and one imitating a white-tailed bumblebee. So I was wondering, presumably they have to mate buff-tailed with buff-tailed, white-tailed with white-tailed, or how does it all work out? What's the genetics of it? I mean, if it's one species, they're not sort of like subspecies. So how does it all work out?
No, they don't have to mate. I have a picture. I haven't shown it. I should have included it, of the white-tailed and the red-tailed Volucella bombolans, the bumblebee mimic mating, and the two different forms mating. That's quite normal. I see it with ladybirds as well. You see the melanistic forms and the normal forms mating. So
what are the offspring? What do the offspring look like? Are they sort of 50-50 one than the other, or how does it work out?
That sort of thing, the normal way the genetics work out. That yes, they'll probably get a range of different offspring. Probably
1 or something like that.
Yeah.
Would one form be dominant over the other, or something like that?
Possibly, but those two main color forms seem to be equally common. So if one had been dominant, you'd expect that one to become more common. So I don't know. But on ladybirds, there'd been a lot of study of different forms mating, and not a lot of conclusions, really, except you do get a variety of different offspring, different forms.
I'm wondering from what you're saying then, David, that they're not using visual cues as their mimics for their mating. Are they using pheromones or something like that so that they can identify themselves?
Oh, probably, yes, yes.
Yeah.
When we saw that Eristalis nemorum doing its courtship hovering, and then we saw it flying over the top of a bumblebee, I guess, it would be picking up pheromones or then not doing, and then it would go away and give up. So I think they are using something like that.
Thank you. Andy Lewis, would you like to ask yours?
Yes, thanks. Thanks for the talk, David. I was wondering about wing spots that you showed on some of the Volucella ones. Are they just pigment, or are they like dragonfly pterostigmata, which actually help with the hovering? Do you know? I
think they're pigment. I think if you see them in dead ones in collections, I don't tend to deal much with. I tend to try and, if I catch a hoverfly, I try to sort of identify it live. But if you see them in collections, you can see quite clearly those just darkened veins, or the actual darkened thing is darkened. But there's probably there are some specialists who'll be able to tell you more detail and sort of microscopic detail of how the different cells on the wings are coloured.
I suppose it would be a different type of hovering anyway, to quite a different design of wing to dragonfly, for instance, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
If I can squeeze another one in, I'm intrigued about the last one you showed with whatever you call it, on for rotating wings.
Oh, Spilomaya, yes.
Yeah. Was it spinning round or something when it did that?
No, it was just
it was static, but just
it's static, sitting on a leaf, and it was static, and I was able to take 2 photographs, and doing it. I don't know if I can sort of demonstrate. It was sort of like a sort of semaphore, like doing. I don't suppose you can see my arms moving.
Yeah, we can. Yeah,
that's about that sort of speed. Whereas normally, a hoverfly, if a fly, I don't know other hoverflies that wing wave, but there are several other types of fly that wave wings. They're doing it like that, symmetrically. This was doing it asymmetrically. But
it was quite slow, so there wouldn't be any sort of circular moment or anything.
No, yeah, not that I could tell. It seemed to be sort of doing it nonchalantly, I would say.
Yes, yeah.
As I say, when I photographed it, I didn't even know it was a hoverfly. Of course, I was even more excited when I discovered, looking in books, that it was.
I don't know whether it's so obvious. Thanks, Andy. I don't know whether it's so obvious when you're looking at a hoverfly as it is, say, with a daddy long legs, but especially the one that you were talking about there, were you able to see what the Holters were doing? Were they going in the opposite directions as well?
With that particular one, it would have been nice to know, but as I didn't know it was a hoverfly, I wasn't looking at the Holteres anyway. So that's a very interesting question. If only I could relive that thing or find another one and video it.
Because when you watch daddy long legs, you can see the Holters on those moving in the opposite direction to the wings, can't you? So I'm assuming it's some sort of counterbalance that they're using them for.
Yes, because the function of the Holteres is balance, isn't it? I mean, I've read people say that the reason that hoverflies can hover is because they have these Holteres and just one pair of wings. But of course, other insects like bees and dragonflies with 2 pairs of wings can hover very impressively. And I've seen the crabrow type bees hovering, doing a very good job.
Well, Alan wants to ask you something that I'm keen to find out as well. So do you want to ask your next one, Alan?
Both Mervyn and I tried to do a bit of photography, and I was very impressed with your photos. They're absolutely crisp. It was actually quite noticeable. I shouldn't perhaps say this, but your photos stood out from the ones which were photos that you'd imported from other people. Can you just say just a little brief bit about, you know, what sort of camera lens and shutter speed and what it had? Just you know, I don't want to turn this into a camera session, but
Yes.
2 minutes on your technique. Thanks.
Well, over the years, I've used different ones because those slides have been taken over a number of years. When I say slides, some of them will have started off life as 35mm slides. Some of them are, you know, film camera. But these days, I tend to go out in the field with two cameras. One is a Sony. Sony. It's just a compact camera, and I use it in manual mode, and automatic mode, and get very close to the subject and just press, and it's sort of doing its own macro. I do it in manual mode because you seem to need three hands to do it. I do it in automatic, to 3 hands to do it manually, and you can get very good results if the light is good. I have got a camera, it's called Iliffe Tough, it's called, where it actually sort of gives you a little LED light, so it illuminates subjects that aren't well illuminated. I haven't used that enough yet, but Stephen Falk uses one, and I think Juliet Bailey has one, and
I have one as well.
Mike's holding up his Christmas present for people to see.
but the other camera I use an SLR with a macro lens. Now for that one, I have to use a very small aperture to get depth of field and flash. And even then, I usually have to tweak when I get the picture, I need to sort of enhance it, enhance the light a bit.
I have the TG4 that's exactly the same as you have.
Oh yes, yeah.
Which is a great little camera because it doesn't weigh very much, and when you're out walking about, you don't want to be taking a huge amount of equipment. When you said you use a flash, is that a ring flash or
No,
just a flash on the camera?
It's actually a flash on the camera. But in days gone by, I used to use an external electronic flash. Remember that one of the one where it was the first female we found in the country?
Yes, yeah.
When I took that, I had an electronic flash, and the battery was low. And I was with Keith Alexander, who I expect wanted to catch the thing in a net. And I wanted to take 2 photographs. And I was waiting probably about 30 seconds for the battery for the flash to warm up again. That's an external flash. But I'm using the flash that's actually built into the camera. That's why I probably have to sort of lighten the pictures once they're produced. But I avoid ring flash because I've seen photographs taken with ring flash which give you horrible reflections on any shiny object. There's a very good book on ladybirds, but some of the illustrations are ruined because you see a sort of half moon where they've obviously used half the ring. The reflection of that doesn't really make for a nice picture. I do know people who use ring flash, but I think I've avoided. I think the ring flash is too head on.
Right, thank you, David. Now we've got a biology teacher asking a why question. So, Des, come on, Des.
Maybe the one I can't answer, or one of the ones I can't answer. We'll give it a go.
Was that me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was just wondering about the mimicry and why they're such close mimics. Because I think if I heard you correctly, you say that they also, some of them mimic the time of the flight periods, and the colour form was striking on one or two of them, how similar they were to the bumblebees.
Yes.
So is that to allow them to predate the bumblebee nest, or is it a protection thing against predators? They think they're chewing up a bumblebee? Or?
Well, I think the mimicry for most of them, even the ones that aren't particularly good mimics, but have the same colours of bees and wasps, it is protection. I think they've evolved because the ones that are brightly coloured have survived better because they haven't been predated, because the potential predators think they're a nasty wasp or a nasty bee or something. But the ones where the lookalike ones, the Volucella, where they actually have an association, I suppose there must be an earlier question came up, but it must be something about the looks that the hosts don't recognize the mimicker as being other than one of them. I suppose if you think of bumblebees, the cuckoo bumblebees, which kick out the bumblebees from their nests and take over. Almost all the cuckoo bumblebees resemble the ones that they do their cuckoo act on. There are very few which look different. The red-tailed bumblebee has the red-tailed cuckoo bumblebee, etc. So I suppose it must be a sort of recognition. That doesn't explain why Volucella pollucens doesn't look anything like a wasp. It does the same as the wasp mimics.
Yeah. So the mimicry is really coming from two different sources, is what you're saying. Yeah.
Yes. There's I suppose the Volucella, the mimicry protects them from things that think potential predators that think they are wasps or bees.
Yeah.
It also allows them to enter the nest unchallenged of the thing that they're mimicking.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Okay.
So, would you like to ask your question?
I suppose when I wrote it, I was thinking about adult hoverflies when I asked about what were the good plants to attract them into your garden. But of course, as with all insects, they part of their life cycle doesn't necessarily mean that they're using the same plant for their adult form as when they're in their larval form. But is there any sort of obviously ranunculus you mentioned earlier presumably is to do with buttercups, but I do notice that quite a lot of them seem to like these flat-headed, umbellifer type plants. Is that often the case?
Umbellifers in particular, though some umbellifers don't seem to have an attraction. One that I grow in the garden is very good is fennel.
Right.
Yes, that's excellent. In the wild, they like angelica, certainly the wild angelica. Composite flowers, compositae, are pretty good. Ivy, when it's in flower, is a big attractor of hoverflies, as of course of other insects.
So what's the earliest that you see adult hoverflies, and what's the latest in the year when you see them?
Okay, well, strictly the answer is the earliest would be the 1st of January and the latest would be the 31st of December, but that's fairly unusual. I think the hoverfly season is a bit like akin to the British cricket season, sort of April through to end of October, that sort of thing. April to September, I think, we're most likely to see them. But you do get some that overwinter, and as adults, and they'll come out on a very bright day in January, if you get a bright warm day.
So some of the bumblebees are quite early, aren't they?
Yes, it's the same, rather the same. But as I said before, some of the Carrara ranunculi among hoverflies, that's an exceptionally early one, and you don't find it later in the season. The one that I said looked like a teddy bear, there was a Cryarina as well, Cryarina berberina, that looked very much the same. You'll seldom find them on the wing at the same time of year, as the Cryarina is early season, and the one that's now Sericomia was Octophila is very much a sort of late season one.
Okay, thank you.
Eristalis pertinax that people mentioned, that's got a very long season. Another one, Platycarus, peltatus has a very long season. But I also mentioned the one Xanthogramma citrofasciatum seems to be just May only. Very few records outside that period. Again, why, I don't know. It may be to do with food plants. And, well, that one, of course, doesn't feed on, only feeds on the adult feeds on flowers, but the it's ants' nests that the larvae go into. So,
Well, that brings me to my question, actually, David. That was it Xanthogramma you were talking about that has this interesting association with the ants?
yes, Xanthogramma.
Yeah. Well, can you expand on that a bit and tell us what they're doing? Because it sounds quite unusual, because I thought that ants farmed the aphids. So why are they tolerating the larva of the hoverfly? Are they farming that as well, or are they just letting it predate their livestock?
I think probably their livestock are being predated by the Xanthogramma larvae, though whether it's a case of letting them or whether there's some chemical thing that stops them, protects them, I don't know. Again, we can't go inside the ants' nests and see exactly what's happening.
No.
I think it's still regarded as speculation that that's what the Xanthogramma larvae are doing. What everyone knows is they and Chrysotoxin, they go and they go into the ants' nest and they lay their eggs there, and then the adults emerge eventually. So what goes on in between, nobody is absolutely certain of. So it's a bit of speculation, though it seems reasonable to think that that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I do find it interesting in that a lot of the communal insects just don't tolerate anything else in the nest, do they? And are very good at getting rid of things that they recognize.
That's
as
right. Yes. So maybe they have some sort of protection, like the bumblebee mimics and wasp mimics that go into the bumblebee and wasp's nest. Something prevents them being attacked.
Yes.
I mean, a hornet would be perfectly capable of attacking and killing a hornet hoverfly.
Yeah.
But obviously they don't, or yes, they go in and seem to be immune from attack.
I've just noticed that I missed a question, and David's got his hand up, so we better come to David and you can do yours.
I can
Dave.
still hear everyone. I haven't got a screen at the moment.
Oh,
If I click on Zoom at the bottom of my, here we're back again.
yeah. Okay.
Oh, plug in and find another power source. I will do that.
Thank you.
I'm just going to plug.
Looks like his
Just
laptop
wait for
just
David
died.
to come back then.
You might have to let him back in, Barry.
Yeah.
While we're waiting to see if David comes back, do you want to do your plug for field meeting again, Des?
Right, yes. Yes, for those who didn't hear at the beginning, this weekend we're meeting at Elmore, just south of Gloucester, at Elmore Court, where they've been doing some rewilding in terms of blocking drains and trying to turn it back into the wetland habitat that used to be so good, I gathered, years ago. It's a bit tricky to get to. The instructions are on the website. If you go past the Pilot Pub over the canal and then turn right at the T-junction, and you go past the court and turn right at the sign to offices, and that's where we're going to meet. I think it should be good. It could be very wet, so you're advised to bring wellies.
Any sign of David coming back on, Barry?
No, not at the moment, Mervyn.
Okay.
Could I just, if David comes back, I'll thank you again. But I just wanted to really make a comment to say how grateful I am to David and a number of other recorders. David's one of the ones who always responds when you send him photos. And as a civil engineer struggling with insects that he doesn't really understand, it's always much appreciated when you do get the feedback and the IDs when it's possible from my photos, which aren't up to his standard, I have to say. And so thank you to David for that. And also, of course, it was an excellent talk, but the talk actually made me realise that my efforts at trying to record hoverflies in the garden, I've been missing out, I'm sure, vast numbers that I really haven't managed to sort out from bumblebees.
Yeah.
Despite how closely they resemble them. And it was David's excellent photos which really showed that up tonight. So again, thanks to him for that.
Des, Jan wants to know what the day the field meeting is and at what time.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's Saturday.
It's Saturday.
10 o'clock. It's at 10 o'clock. I haven't got it in front of me, so I'm.
No, you're quite right, Des. It's Saturday, 10 till 1300.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got the website up in front of me here. So.
Oh, thank you, Mervyn. You saved me there. Yeah. Yeah.
Just to follow up what Dave was saying, that David is on the GNS playground, and invariably, if you post a picture of a hoverfly there, David will get back to you very, very quickly. So he mentioned that he doesn't get so many personal correspondence nowadays, but I know that he searches through the online recording things like iRecord and iNaturalist, because he has found a number of my photographs that I've taken of hoverflies and used iNaturalist to identify them. And before I've thought about getting round to send them to him, he's found them online before I've done it. So he's very active in recording, and as Dave says, he's very good at responding. So and as you've seen from this evening, he really enjoys talking about them and identifying them. So if any of you do find any that you want identified, David's your man. Andy, you've got your palm up in the air.
I have. I just wanted to sort of make a comment on photography. I've used a small compact camera, Panasonic, to photograph insects on the ground. I spent a lot of money on a Canon macro lens and failed miserably with it, because you really need to have a very good technique. And in terms of insects, I'd like to share something with you, but what I'd like to show you is this. This is my Olympus with a 100-400 zoom on it. This will focus down to 1.3 meters. And if I can just share this screen and show you what I've been able to do with it. What you should be seeing there is Xanthogramma. And with that zoom lens, you can stand 6 or 8 feet away and get in really close, because it will focus very close. And there you've got Volucella zonaria, that was in the garden. And again, same thing applies. Standing sort of 6 feet away, with that zoom lens, it's actually much easier to get decent results than I ever found with the macro lens, which was a nightmare, to be perfectly honest. And I don't use flash because, as David said, various flashes give you all sorts of weird reflections which spoil photographs of particularly shiny insects like beetles.
Yeah, I'm with you there, Andrew. I find macro lenses very difficult to use with insects, so I've always resorted to the zoom lens, or even just a prime telephoto.
Right. I think the problem with macro lenses they're really great if the subject is standing still.
Mm,
But insects, by their very nature, tend to be hyperactive,
yeah.
which makes it very difficult. It would be fine for photographing perhaps flowers, which you can stand in a vase and put a blank screen behind them and this sort of thing.
Mm.
But no, it was hopeless with insects. I gave up and sold it in the end.
Still no sign of him in the waiting room, Barry.
Still no sign. I'll stop the recording now anyway.
Okay.